Hey everyone, welcome back to Corporate Decoder, the place where we break down the financial jargon so you don't have to. Today we're diving into a filing from Texas Mineral Resources Corp, and let's just say things got a little more interesting than a typical Tuesday. So Texas Mineral Resources Corp is here with a report that touches on some recent financial activity. It is like they're updating us on a purchase that already happened, which is a bit like your friend telling you they bought a new car a week after they drove it off the lot. This report is dated the 19th of September 2025, but it is actually reporting on an event that happened a few days earlier on the 15th of September. This is a common thing with these filings. They give you the official date the report is being submitted, but then they specify the date of the actual event they are reporting. Now, the company itself, Texas Mineral Resources Corp, is filing this Form 8K, which is essentially a report that public companies file to announce major events that shareholders should know about. Think of it as a company S way of saying, hey, something important just happened. We see the usual company identification here. They are incorporated in Delaware, have a commission file number and an IRS employer identification number. These are like the company's social security numbers and state of origin, important for official records, but not really the juicy details we are looking for. And we see their phone number, again standard procedure, essential for official contact, but not the main story. Here is a small but potentially important note. It says none of their securities are registered to be sold on stock exchanges like the NYSE or NASDAQ. This means their shares aren't directly traded on the major exchanges that most investors are familiar with. This doesn't mean they aren't traded, just not on those big national exchanges. The report then dives into some background details. It mentions previous filings from February of 2025. Specifically, they entered into agreements with 15 investors. These agreements were for loan and securities purchases. These investors lent the company close to $1,100,000. And as part of these deals, the investors got something called warrants. Think of warrants like a coupon that allows you to buy a company's stock at a certain price in the future. In this case, the warrants were for a significant number of shares and were valid for 5 years with an exercise price, meaning the price they could buy the stock for of 30 cents per share. Later, in August of 2025, the company announced that a big chunk of this money, the $1 million+ was converted into stock. So instead of just owing money, the investors received over 3.5 million shares of common stock. This is a pretty common transaction where debt gets turned into ownership. Now, the filing clarifies that these shares were not registered with the SEC. This is INS T necessarily a bad thing, but it means they were sold directly to a select group of investors. In this case, those 15 accredited investors. The report states they are relying on an exemption from registration, specifically Section 4A(2) of the Securities Act. This exemption is generally for transactions made directly with investors who are sophisticated enough to understand the risks without the usual public disclosures. This brings us to the main event of this particular filing. It is about a partial exercise of one of those warrants we mentioned earlier. Remember those warrants that allowed investors to buy shares at 30 cents? Well, one investor decided to use a portion of their warrant and bought more shares of common stock. This specific part of the report, item 8.01, tells us the details. On the 15th of September 2025, a holder of a warrant that was issued back in February partially exercised that warrant. They bought a hefty 500,000 shares of common stock. And how much did this cost them? They paid a total of $150,000. If you do the math, that is exactly 30 cents per S-share, which matches that initial exercise price we saw mentioned earlier. So they used their warrant to buy stock at the predetermined price. The report is then signed off by the Chief Financial Officer, WM Chris Mathers, confirming these details are accurate on behalf of the company. So let's look at the bigger picture here. Texas Mineral Resources Corp has had a series of transactions involving raising capital through convertible notes and warrants. This latest filing is an update on one of those warrant exercises. The company effectively sold more stock, bringing in cash and converting some of that previous debt into actual equity. This is a standard way for companies, especially smaller ones, to fund their operations and growth. However, the fact that they are relying on unregistered sales and having warrants with a relatively low exercise price suggests they might be in a growth phase where they need capital and are offering incentives for investors. The key takeaway is that a shareholder is exercising their right to buy more stock, indicating some confidence in the company's future value, at least at that 30 cent per share level. Now, my take on all this Texas Mineral Resources Corp appears to be actively managing its capital structure. They are using financial instruments like convertible notes and warrants to bring in money. The exercise of these warrants is a positive signal, as it means investors are putting in more cash to get actual shares. However, we don't have detailed financial tables in this particular filing, so we can't analyze revenue, profit, or cash flow trends right here. But based on this report, it seems they're in a stage of financing that involves bringing in investors who are likely looking for significant growth potential, given the nature of warrants and the exercise price. A key risk here could be the dilution of existing shareholders if a lot more warrants are exercised, meaning more shares are issued, which can reduce the ownership percentage of current shareholders. An opportunity lies in how they use this newly generated cash to further their business objectives, presumably in mineral resources. Alright, that is our breakdown of this Texas Mineral Resources Corp filing. What is your take on these warrant exercises and what they signal for the company's future? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If this analysis was valuable, hitting that like button really helps, and subscribe for more deep dives. Don't forget to check out the Discord in the description. Thanks for watching, see you next time.